My name is Arpan Banerjee. I'm a doctoral fellow at the Department of East Asian Studies, University of Delhi, and academic counselor here at IGNOU. And I've been teaching you this paper, the name of which is Indian Government and Politics. And the code of this paper is BPSC 132. So I welcome you all to today's learning session. So let us begin today's class. So far in this paper, we have discussed the first block, that is block 1. And as part of the first block, that is block 1, we have so far, the block 1 is pertaining to approaches to study Indian politics. So in this block 1, which is approaches to study Indian politics, we have so far discussed the first unit that was pertaining to the liberal approach to study Indian politics that we had finished in the last class. In today's class, we are going to discuss the second unit and the third unit. So the second unit is pertaining to the Marxist approach to study Indian politics, and the third unit is pertaining to the Gandhian approach to study Indian politics. So let us begin today's class with the second unit, that is the Marxist approach to study Indian politics. So the Marxist approach, it is a way of studying society. And this approach, the Marxist approach, is influenced by Marxism. So generally after the disintegration of the USSR or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics in the 1980s, and after the rise of non-communist parties in different parts of the world, the question is often asked whether Marxism is relevant now or not. So this question can be addressed in two ways. One, the first way is that Marxism as a philosophy to change the world, and second is Marxism as a perspective to explain the change in society or evolution of history. So nothing can be definitely said about the change in society or revolution as envisaged by Marxism. But Marxism as a tool or perspective to explain politics or changes in society is being used by several scholars. So this is known as the Marxist or the Marxian approach or perspective. And this unit will discuss how Marxist approach has been used to explain politics in India. Now, we shall be discussing the meaning and scope of Marxist approach. So Marxist approach to Indian politics is guided by the basic tenets of Marxism. So these tenets, they attempt to interpret society in such a way that it helps to change the society. To put it differently, Marxist approach implies application of principle of dialectical materialism or historical materialism and explain the nature of class struggle, as well as suggest ways to end class exploitation. So according to dialectical materialism, there are classes in a society. The relations between classes can be viewed in terms of social relations of production and forces of production. So the social relations of production and forces of production together are known as mode of production. So this dialectical method, Karl Marx, he took it from George William Friedrich Hegel. So in such areas, the technology of development is traditional in comparison to the areas which have seen development of capitalism or where class formation is more crystallized. So the Marxist perspective generally undermines the role of caste in determining classes. So moving away from this trend, a Marxist scholar whose name is Gail Omvedt, so in his work Land, Caste and Politics in Indian States, Gail Omvedt observed that class divisions in rural societies are intertwined in caste hierarchies, and this is true in both areas where capitalism in agriculture has developed, such as Punjab, Haryana, Western Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Gujarat, and as well as in feudal and backward states such as Bihar, according to Gail Ombit. Now we shall talk about some of the movements. Since Marxism is sympathetic to lower classes, agricultural laborers, working classes, or peasantry, it aims to end class exploitation. So, Marxist approach emphasizes in studying material conditions of classes, their social relations, and attempt by them to improve their conditions. So, their attempts include collective action or movements of different classes. Although Marxist perspective has been used to study movements of several sections of society in India, it has been used most prominently to study peasants and farmers' movements, agricultural laborers and workers' movements as well. So the movements which have been studied include both which happened in colonial and post-colonial period. So we shall be discussing some examples of how Marxist approach is used to study these examples. So if we talk about peasants and farmers movements, although generally peasants and farmers are generally, these terms are used generally interchangeably, there is a difference between them. Peasant is a generic category and farmer is used for agriculturists who use modern technology and are more resourceful than the peasants. So the prime focus in peasant studies has been to identify classes in agriculture, process of class formation, social and economic relations in terms of rent collection, indebtedness, nature of social oppression, and economic exploitation. So, to study the resistance of peasants to the exploitation, that is, the demands and patterns of mobilization, and to study the responses of the exploiting classes and the state. So, in the post-independence period, the focus of Marxist approach it shifted to study the politics of land reforms, movements for implementation of land reforms, and impact of land reforms. So, in studying land reforms, it attempted to analyze the impact of land reforms in terms of granting ownership of land to tenants, abolition of landlordism, as well as consolidation of the land holdings. So the Marxist approach also sought to assess the extent of success of land reforms. The examples of using Marxist approach to study peasant movements they include Dhanagre, Sunil Sen, Majid Siddiqui, Girish Mishra for the colonial period, Tom Brass's Peasants' Populism and Postmodernism for the post-colonial period. So, in elementary aspects of peasant insurgency in colonial India, using subaltern variant of Marxist approach, Ranjit Guha argues that during the colonial period, the peasants did not rebel against the landlords and the British oppressors blindly. They did so with consciousness. So Ranjit Guha says that during the colonial period, the peasant rebellions that took place against the landlords and the British, they were not done blindly by the peasants. Rather, the peasants had a consciousness. So, using history from below perspective, which also focuses the underprivileged classes, Kapil Kumar in Peasants in Revolt studied peasant movement during the colonial period in Awadh region of Uttar Pradesh. He situated the peasant movement in context of class relations and social and economic conditions of peasants in the Awadh region of Uttar Pradesh. So the themes which are studied according to Marxist approach, they cut across disciplinary boundaries. The most common themes which have been studied in India according to this approach are class formation and class collaboration, movements of peasants farmers, workers, and nature of Indian state. So we are done with the second unit of this paper, that is Marxist approach. Now let us move to the third unit, that is Gandhian approach. So Gandhian approach is different from the liberal approach in the following way. Liberal approach, especially its variant system approach, does not emphasize its change. It underlines the resilience of the system and consensus building in the system. So, but it has some similarities and differences with the Marxist approach. So, its similarities with the Marxist approach are that both approaches are used as ways to interpret change in the society and as vision for social change. So, Gandhian approach, like the Marxist approach, has been used both by politicians, political activists, Gandhian reformers, politicians and intellectuals like Chaudhry Charan Singh, Ram Manohar Lohia, and scholars to critique the existing developmental model and to provide an alternative. So there are some basic differences between Gandhian and Marxist approaches. Gandhian approach underlines significance of non-violence, ethics and principles of trusteeship. The Marxist approach seeks to explain nature of class struggles. Gandhism suggests that there should be trust among the workers and the propertied class. And based on this trust, he gave the theory of trusteeship. The latter should establish trusteeship and share their wealth. So he was inspired by the likes of Henry David Thoreau, by the likes of John Ruskin. So he says that if the propertied class establish trusteeship and share their wealth, it will reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. Therefore, there should be a relationship of trust between the workers and the propertied class. Now let us discuss the meaning and scope of Gandhian approach. So Gandhian approach denotes using Gandhian tenets or Gandhism to explain the social reality or truth and suggest ways to build new society. So these tenets are truth, non-violence, satyagraha, swaraj, sarvodaya, justification of means to achieve goals, ethics, morality, Ram Rajya. So these are some of the tenets that Gandhiji talks about to build a new society. So these are some of the basic tenets of the Gandhian approach, or what has been called Gandhism. So it is quite different from Marxist approach. Now, in this approach, non-violence is more than just avoidance of violence and harming others. It is to harm oneself. So to harm oneself through activities such as fasting is to exercise moral authority on those who possess power. The ultimate goal which Gandhian tenets seek to achieve is to establish Swaraj, or self-control or self-realization. So this will, according to Gandhiji, lead to the formation of Ram Rajya, or a society where people live in peace and harmony, govern themselves and enjoy security. So in Ram Rajya, an ideal society, people, they self-regulate, they self-govern through village panchayats and village republics. So it is high civil society. Such societies have compassion and fellow feeling. So in Ram Rajya, the village panchayats, they perform the functions which can be performed by the state. So Ram Rajya or Swaraj, it implies minimum role to the state, which is a coercive institution. So when a scholar uses concept of satyagraha, non-violence and truth, etc., to analyze role of institutions such as the state, sharing of power, decentralization, mobilization through non-violence and non-cooperation, it denotes the Gandhian approach. So whenever a scholar uses concepts of satyagraha or non-violence or truth, to analyze the role of the institutions such as the state or the sharing of power or the concept of decentralization, or whenever a scholar talks about mobilization through non-violence or non-cooperation, all these they denote usage of the Gandhian approach. So, according to the concept of Ram Rajya or Swaraj, it implies minimum role to the state, which is viewed as a coercive institution. So, Gandhian approach, it has been used in different disciplines in social science. And in Ram Rajya, an ideal society, people they self-regulate through village panchayats, village republics. So this kind of a Ram Rajya is basically high civil society. So now we shall discuss In Search of a Human Face. So one of the most influential political scientists who has used Gandhian approach to Indian politics is Rajni Kothari. He, along with some other intellectuals, they founded Lokayan with a group of intellectuals. According to Gail Omvedt, Lokayan or Reinventing Socialist Revolution, quoted by Rudolph and Rudolph, was a Gandhian socialist civil society organization. As a member of Lokayan, Rajni Kothari has been influenced by Gandhian philosophy. This is reflected in his academic and popular writings since the 1970s. Rajni Kothari used systems approach, a variant of liberal approach, to explain Indian politics. So systems approach was given by David Easton. And Rajni Kothari, in his work, Politics in India, he has used systems approach, which basically is a variant of liberal approach to explain Indian politics. And he was very much influenced by the Gandhian philosophy, and it is reflected in his writings post 1970. And he also created this NGO, this civil society organization, which was termed as a Gandhian socialist civil society organization by Gail Omvedt, the name of which was Lokayan. So it was done to reinvent the socialist revolution on a Gandhian paradigm. So the usage of Gandhian approach in Rajni Kothari's later writings, they emerged out of his critique of the systems approach. He rethought some of the premises which were earlier analyzed in the systems framework. The changes that took place over 4 decades following independence could not be explained by the systems approach. That is what he felt, Rajni Kothari felt. Therefore, he rethought some of the premises which were earlier analyzed in the systems approach, which he gave in his work, Politics in India. So, in the usage of the Gandhian approach, in his later writings, it emerged out of his critique of the systems approach only. So the changes that could be seen in influence of technology and subservience of the state to it, and consequent problems in society, that is violence, etc., people's movements, human rights violation, ethnicity, identities, erosion of institutions, rise of individual leaders like Indira Gandhi, populism, as well as personal loyalties. So these were some of the changes post independence in the 4 decades that followed independence. And they, according to Rajni Kothari, could not be explained by the systems approach. So, in Rajni Kothari's opinion, due to over influence of technology, the Indian state, it became inhumane. It turned against its own people. So a need for human face of the state was felt, according to Rajni Kothari, and it necessitated rethinking of the framework which could help in search of a new India. So, alien model of development, which was not pro people, worked under the shadow of world capitalism. So, the alternative is available in a human framework influenced by Gandhian principles. Kothari underlined an approach that was in many ways different from earlier selections. His new writings they contradict his earlier work. So, the alternative framework influenced by Gandhian philosophy was supposed to be more democratic than the present one, that is the Westminster model. So, according to this perspective, the Westminster model was implanted in India from outside, from a prosperous milieu to a poor country, and it gave more powers to the executive and bureaucracy, leading to undue centralization of powers for policy initiative and implementation. So there has often been a talk of new constitution. According to Rajni Kothari, development model in India where technology dominates the state, there are two Indians. The state is being manipulated by corporate capitalism and common people are suffering. On the one hand, democracy has been hijacked by the rich. On the other, it has become playground for communal casteist and the corrupt, according to Rajni Kothari. So, in this context, when party and institutions are losing credibility, non-party politics is happening in every part of the country. So, alternative which is emerging, that is alternative movement and people's action. So now let us discuss the Gandhian approach and political science in India. So in political science, the most common themes which have been studied by Gandhian approach are social movements and the usage of satyagraha in them, as well as the critique of Indian states as a coercive institution, the notion of Swaraj, communal and social harmony and decentralization through Panchayati Raj institutions, or the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts and the influence of Gandhism on development debate and on perspectives, etc. So, Gandhian way is used to assess the influence of Gandhism on intellectuals such as former Prime Minister Chaudhry Charan Singh, Ram Manohar Lohia, and other socialist leaders. So Ram Manohar Lohia and Chaudhry Charan Singh they attacked industrialization in favor of small scale village industries. So although Chaudhry Charan Singh was influenced by Gandhiji, he disagreed with Gandhiji on some issues. For instance, he opposed to Gandhiji's notion of cooperative farming. He opined Gandhiji's views in support of cooperative farming. So, if you see rural industrialization, that was a vision of Gandhiji, which was later espoused by Prime Minister Chaudhry Charan Singh. Uh, it is enshrined in Article 43 of our Constitution, which says that it is the responsibility of the state to promote cottage industries in rural areas either on individual or cooperative basis. That is what Article 43 it says. And in Article 39 also there are many, in the Constitution of India, in Article 39, there are many Gandhian principles as well. So the principle that talks about that the operation of the economy should not result in the concentration of wealth in a few hands to the common detriment. This is also a Gandhian principle. And the organization of village panchayats, Article 40, which says that the state should organize village panchayats and should endow them with all sorts of political and financial autonomy, which was finally done. So this is basically about decentralization, because Gandhiji viewed India as a collection of village republics. So This is where he said uh, that decentralization is very important, and in the constitution also, this value is enshrined in Article 40, which talks about endowing political and fiscal autonomy to the village panchayats, because Gandhiji, he viewed the panchayats as uh, the core of the Indian Republic, and he said that India is a collection of village republics. And his theory of oceanic circles, according to that theory of concentric oceanic circles, the village was at the core, at the middle of that circle, and it was surrounded by other villages, the bigger villages. So there was a small village surrounded by a bigger village, surrounded by another bigger village, and they all were dependent on each other. So that is how it was. And Gandhiji said that if that kind of a society based on satyagraha and ahimsa, that the kind of a village republic can be really built, then there is no need for the state. The state is needless then, because he viewed the state as an instrument of coercion. And he said that if the state is not there, then there is no need for the armed forces as well. So that is where you can see there is a commonality between the Marxist approach and the Gandhian approach. The Marxist approach also talks about the withering away of the state. So when the class struggles would end, according to the Marxist approach, it is a very utopian vision. When the class struggles would end, the state would become needless and the state would wither away, according to the Marxist approach. And according to the Gandhian approach also, if these self-sufficient village republics can be formed, and if his theory of oceanic circles, it can be implemented, it can be implemented completely, then the state, it would become useless, and there would be no need for a state, because individuals will self-regulate themselves through the village republic. So Gandhiji's theory had the village at its center. He talked about rural industrialization, cottage industries, as well as creating these village republics. And if you see in the 73rd Amendment Act, panchayats, they were given political and fiscal autonomy, and they were given constitutional recognition in the year 1992. And different provisions of Article 243 were inserted. Uh, and also, the State Finance Commission came into being to ensure the fiscal autonomy and to ensure that the finances are available to the panchayats for them to do their work. And however, there have been certain issues. The state finance commissions, mandated by the 73rd Amendment, they are not constituted timely, and they have to give this action taken report as well. The state government has to submit an action taken report in the state legislative assembly as well on what has been done to implement the recommendations of the State Finance Commission. So the State Finance Commission, it analyzes the situation of the panchayats as well as the municipalities, and then it makes certain recommendations. Although those are only recommendations, they are not binding. That to improve the finances of the panchayats and the municipalities, certain steps are needed to be taken. However, it has been observed that the state government, the provincial government, they do not heed to most of the advices or recommendations, because of course they are not binding, and they are not even forming these state finance commissions timely, in a timely manner. So based on this recommendations of the state finance commissions, the Central Finance Commission, also enshrined in Article 280 of the Constitution of India, they also make certain recommendations to improve the condition of the panchayats. And also one big issue regarding the panchayats is the issue of tied funds. So the funds that are given by that are devolved. So the fiscal devolution that is done by the state governments, the funds that are allotted to the panchayats, they are tied funds. They are not untied funds. So they can be used only for specific purposes. So it has been observed that despite Gandhiji's vision and despite constitutional recognition, the panchayats are not being able to function as institutions of political autonomy, and their fiscal autonomy has been stifled. So the items that were allotted to them in the that have been allotted to them in the 11th schedule of the constitution, those items, there are 29 items which should be given to the panchayats for their administration, and regarding which the panchayats should also have taxation powers. They have not been completely given. They have not been completely devolved by the state governments, who remain reluctant to give too much power to the panchayats. Through the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act, the PESA Act of 1996, local governance has now reached even the fifth scheduled tribal areas, which are given in Article 244 of the Constitution, and they have played a huge role in improving the environmental conditions as well. So it has led, the PESA Act and its implementation has led to an increase of 3% in the forest canopy, combined with the Forest Rights Act of 2005. So these are some of the constitutional provisions regarding local governance in our country. And local governance, although the provisions are there in the constitution, however, the implementation process, it needs to go a long way. Also, the measures to seek accountability and transparency of the village panchayats, that also needs to be ensured, and through different mechanisms like the right to information, which we have discussed, that was done by the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan in Rajasthan, through different methods like social audits and Jan Sunwais. Accountability and transparency can be ensured in this in the functioning of the panchayats. So, although Chaudhry Charan Singh was influenced by Gandhiji, he disagreed with Gandhiji on some of the issues. For instance, he was opposed to Gandhiji's notion of cooperative farming, and he opined that Gandhi's views in support of cooperative farming, he made certain opinions. However, Chaudhry Charan Singh was not opposed to cooperative farming, to cooperative in service in farming. So the tenets of Gandhism or Gandhian philosophy which influenced Ram Manohar Lohia, they included unsuitability of European model of socialism. So Ram Manohar Lohia, he was against imposing any European model of socialism. For example, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, he was influenced by Fabian socialism of England. And then there were the Marxist parties which were influenced by the Russian socialism that came from Russia, the Marxism and Leninism. So Ram Manohar Lohia, he was in favor of and developing an indigenous breed of socialism rather than importing socialism from outside, because he believed that the social conditions in Europe and in our country, the conditions in which socialism emerged in those countries, and the social realities of our country, they are completely different. So that is why Ram Manohar Lohia ji, he was influenced by the philosophy of Gandhiji, and some of the tenets of Gandhian or Gandhism philosophy which influenced Ram Manohar Lohia, they included unsuitability of European model of socialism. So Ram Manohar Lohia critiqued Nehruvian model of development from the point of view of Nehruvian model of development. He was most influenced by Gandhian ideas of civil disobedience or satyagraha and economic and political decentralization. So, as in Gandhian perspective, the state has generally been viewed as a soulless machine which uses coercive methods. So Gandhian perspective seeks to explain the extent to which state is required to provide to provide security. So in the Gandhian perspective, the state has been viewed as a soulless machine which uses coercive methods, and the Gandhian perspective seeks to explain the extent to which state is required to provide security. So indeed, Gandhiji is not opposed to the state. Instead, he supports minimum state because it provides security. The role of the state can be performed by the Panchayati Raj institutions. According to Gandhiji, the state should perform minimum functions. So Gandhism supports a kind of democracy in which people share power and participate in decision-making process through decentralization or Panchayati Raj institution. So now discuss about social and social harmony. So the question how Gandhism has helped to combat communal polarization has been used by historians, especially with reference to the Noakhali riots. So in Noakhali, Gandhiji could use religion in politics and satisfaction or justification of violence by religion. The question which was addressed in Noakhali was if Gandhi's doctrine was failing and how idea was of conversion made to justify violence. So in the case of Noakhali riots, the historians have attempted to see the impact of Gandhian method of satyagraha to achieve communal harmony. It was so despite the fact Gandhi was criticized by both Hindus and Muslims. So the Gandhian Bhikkhu Parekh, he viewed the Noakhali riots through the notion of interrelatedness of personal purity or personal suffering through hunger strike, etc., and political success achieved in communal harmony. So the Gandhian perspective attempts to analyze how different communities can be brought together in situations of communal strife. Now let us discuss some of the social movements, Gandhian social movements. So studying Gujarat movement in Gujarat 1974 against the price rise, Ghanshyam Shah shows the role of Satyagraha in anti-levy. So the movement which was launched by the students began against inflated mess bills, took up varieties of issues, that is corruption, black marketing, price rise, denationalization, civil liberties. So the agitation it forced the Gujarat Chief Minister Chiman Bhai Patel to resign, and it later got linked with the JP movement. So it provided a background to imposition of emergency in 1975, and some scholars underline the importance of satyagraha and non-violence in farmers' movements and in movements against corruption. So Gandhians like Subbarao and Rajagopal PV and Jayaprakash Narayan, they used Gandhian ways to convince dacoits in Chambal to surrender, abjuring violence, and follow non-violence to mobilization of youths in Bihar in the JP movements against corruption and against emergency. So Balagopal, he founded the Ekta Parishad to mobilize tribals against encroachment of their land and for granting land rights to them. So Ekta Parishad is inspired by Gandhian philosophy of non-violence and non-cooperation. It sought to bring the state and society together. For this purpose, a joint task force JTF was formed in the 1980s. So this Ekta Parishad was formed by Rajagopal PV. Now, if you're talking about the approaches to study Indian politics, so this Ekta Parishad, it pressurized the Congress, the Digvijay Singh-led Congress government of Madhya Pradesh to introduce land reforms, and over the 3 decades from 1990s onwards, Ekta Parishad took up various issues like wages, migration, bonded labor, rehabilitation, employment, etc. So, Article 23 of the Constitution, it says that forced labor or bonded labor and traffic in human beings is prohibited, and it is a fundamental right. And Article 39, Clause A, it talks about equal wage for equal work for both men and women. So these are again Gandhian principles in the Constitution, and to uphold them, the Ekta Parishad has done commendable work. Also to uphold Article 43 of the Constitution. which is which says that minimum wage for the workers should get minimum living wage. The workers should be getting a minimum living wage, and they should also be getting full opportunities of full enjoyment of leisure as well as social and cultural opportunities. So, to implement these Gandhian principles, the Ekta Parishad has done commendable job. It has pressurized the Congress Digvijay Singh government to introduce land reform so that the vision of Article 39, which is a Gandhian vision, can be implemented, which says the means of production should not be concentrated in a few hands to the common detriment. So Ekta Parishad, it launched an alternative mobilization or new social movement in Bundelkhand region of Uttar Pradesh and in Chhattisgarh. So the Ekta Parishad, it organized long march, pad yatras, dharnas, chakka jams, etc., as well as land satyagraha of peasants from Madhya Pradesh to Delhi, passing through different states of India. Now let us discuss the party system. So revising his views on revisiting the Congress system. So Rajni Kothari, he said that during the 1950s and the 1960s there was something called Congress system in India. So it was absolute domination of the Congress. The Congress was the government as well as the opposition. So he said that the Congress was like a thermostat. So it had certain organs through which the dissidents they could express their dissent. And however, through this kind of a mechanism, why it was called a thermostat was it could absorb all the pressures around it and without letting any change in the system. Like a thermostat, it maintains a constant temperature. So the Congress party, it had this ability to absorb the different pressures that were being created and not let any change to be made to its system. So that is why Rajni Kothari said that the Congress system is like a thermostat, and he said that the Congress was like an umbrella party. It had people from its members followed different ideologies, and still they were in the same political party. So, revising his views on revisiting the Congress system, Rajni Kothari states that a government will not be able to deliver without grassroots organization. So, in the post-Nehruvian period, the Congress was lacking the grassroots organization, according to Rajni Kothari, and that is why there was a crisis in the Congress. And because of the lack of grassroots organization, the Congress it got split in 1969 into the Indian National Congress O or organization, which was led by the old guards. That is people like K. Kamraj, Nijalingappa, Morarji Desai, and the new another faction which got created was the Indian National Congress Requisitionist, which later became the Indian National Congress Indira or the Indira Congress. It was led by Indira Gandhi, and this faction it emerged victorious, gradually suppressing the previous faction or Indian National Congress O, which later rebranded itself as the Congress for Democracy, led by Babu Jagjivan Ram. So this was during the 1969 presidential elections, where the official Congress candidate Neelam Sanjiva Reddy lost to the candidate backed by Indira Gandhi, that is Varagiri Venkatagiri. So, revising his views on revisiting the Congress system, Rajni Kothari states that a government will not be able to deliver without grassroots organization. In the post-Nehruvian period, according to Rajni Kothari, the Congress was lacking grassroots organization. So even conflict which assumes the form of mass agitation grows outside the legislature and electoral channels. So it develops rapport with the people. So in the absence of organization, police and hirelings from outside, they make up for the gap in the organizational structure. So according to Rajni Kothari, if the Congress fails in building grassroots cadres, it can be filled up by the opposition. So without bringing back the party structure, elections will lose credibility, according to Rajni Kothari. Now let us discuss the impact of Gandhian philosophy on public policies. So the Janata government, which came to power in 1977 and which stayed for a very brief period of 3 years, and in those 3 years there were two prime ministers. From 1977 to 1979, it was Morarji Desai, and from 1979 to 1980, it was Chaudhary Charan Singh. So this Janata government's policies, they attempted to replace the Nehruvian model of development, investment priorities and plan allocation in favor of agriculture rather than industry. So employment through investment in agriculture and small scale industry and appropriate policy. That was their vision. And the Janata government also undid many of the things that were done by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment through the 44th Constitutional Amendment. So, through such policies, India was supposed to become a nation more of farmers than of bureaucrats, according to the Janata government. So, these are some examples of the impact of Gandhism on state policies. So, such issues have been influenced by Gandhian perspectives. Chaudhary Charan Singh's attack on Nehruvian model and his views on alternative model of development, giving priority to agriculture, village community and small scale industries, they can be viewed to be cast in Gandhian framework. So Chaudhary Charan Singh accused Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru of having deindustrialized India. So using Gandhian approach, Rahul Ramagundam underlines a role of material and ethics in sustenance of life. So the material aspect was influenced by Nehruvian philosophy and ethical aspect was influenced by Gandhian philosophy. However, there has been lack of adequate policy-oriented assessment of Gandhian socio-economic practices. So there needs to be some adequate policy-oriented assessment of Gandhian socio-economic practices. So using the Gandhian approach, Rahul Ramagundam, he underlines the role of material and ethics in the sustenance of life. So the material aspect was influenced by Nehruvian philosophy and ethical aspect was influenced by Gandhian philosophy, according to Rahul Ramagundam. However, there has been a lack of adequate policy-oriented assessment of Gandhian socio-economic practices. Now let us discuss Gandhian perspective and postmodernism. So in their book, Postmodern Gandhi and Other Essays, Lloyd Rudolph and Suzanne Rudolph, they liken Gandhi to a postmodern thinker. They challenge the general notion about Gandhi that he was a traditional leader. In their opinion, Gandhi was a postmodernist. For understanding as to why Rudolph and Rudolph consider Gandhi as a postmodern thinker, it is relevant to identify some core features of postmodernism. These features are as follows: primacy to the segment of a whole or its fragments, truth as a contested reality, and significance of the context. So, some of the features of postmodernism are primacy to the segment of a whole or its fragments, truth as a contested reality, and significance of the context. So, in relation to these features, Rudolph and Rudolph also categorize Gandhi as a postmodernist thinker. So, quoting Gandhi's book Hind Swaraj and My Experiments with Truth, Rudolph and Rudolph, they argue that for Gandhi, the authenticity of truth is contextual and experimental. So Gandhi's emphasis on the need for decentralization of social and political power also qualifies him to be designated as a postmodern thinker. So Gandhian approach is a way to explain and vision to affect change in society, and it has been followed by three kinds of persons such as professional academicians, activists and politicians who are inspired by the Gandhian philosophy. So the followers of this approach, they try to see as to how basic tenets of Gandhism such as truth, non-violence, satyagraha, swaraj, Ram Rajya, Sarvodaya, etc. can be applied to explain issues in Indian politics. And Gandhiji, he believed in the philosophy of Sarvodaya, that is the empowerment of the weakest person in the society. So, if the weakest person, the person at the bottom, if that person is empowered, then only true development can take place. And he also gave a vision of a new education system for creating a Gandhian state that was called the Nai Talim, that focused on vocational education as well. So the issues which have received the most attention of political scientists, they include decentralization, dissent in democracy, social harmony, importance of rural society, and place of agriculture and small scale industries as alternative to heavy industry based development. They have also used Gandhian perspective to critique the Nehruvian model of development. So, Gandhian activists and politicians, in addition, they have used Gandhian tactics such as satyagraha, hunger strike to mobilize popular support. So, Nehruvian model, it was pretty much based on centralization rather than decentralization, and it focused on industrialization, on creating these big industries. And it was a departure from the Gandhian model. So the Gandhian model talked about rural industrialization, cottage industries, small scale industries, so that the village can become a self sufficient unit of the republic. And that is what was Gandhiji's vision. But Nehru was inspired pretty much by what was happening in the Soviet Union, by the vision of Joseph Stalin. So the 5 year plans that were adopted, they were adopted from Soviet Union only. And his model was you can say socialist, but that socialism was European socialism. So he created, as per his Nehruvian vision, big industries were created, state-owned corporations like the BHEL, the NTPC, and these corporations, they came into being, and industrial towns and industrial cities also emerged throughout the country. And people from the countryside, from the rural areas, they started migrating en masse to these cities. And these cities then became soulless machines that Gandhiji talked about. So instead of focusing on the villages, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's vision was to industrialize the cities, create big industries and big infrastructure projects. So that is why there is a difference between Gandhian perspective and Nehruvian model of development, which was centralized, and Gandhian perspective focuses on decentralization. So Gandhian activists and politicians, in addition, they have used Gandhian tactics such as satyagraha, hunger strike to mobilize popular support. So the issues which have received the most attention of political scientists, the issues which have been discussed by Gandhiji in his works like Hind Swaraj and My Experiments with Truth, the issues which have received the most attention of political scientists, they include decentralization, dissent in democracy, social harmony, importance of rural society, place of agriculture and small scale industries as alternative to heavy industry based development, a model which was followed by India in as per the Nehruvian vision, which was enshrined in the second 5 year plan as well, which was crafted by Prashant Chandra Mahalanobis, also called the Mahalanobis plan. So we have discussed in today's class the Marxist perspective and the Gandhian perspective. So one similarity between the Marxist perspective and the Gandhian perspective is the withering away of the state. Both say that the state is basically useless, and the Gandhiji talks about a minimum state, and he says that the Panchayati Raj institutions, they can act as organs of the state to ensure security, because he focuses on village republics and says that India is a collection of village republics. So in the Ram Rajya, the village panchayats, they can perform the functions which are performed by the state, And the Ram Rajya or Swaraj, it implies minimum role to the state, which is viewed as a coercive institution by Gandhiji. So, when a scholar uses the concept of satyagraha, non-violence, and truth, etc., to analyze the role of institutions in a state, then we can say that that particular scholar is using a Gandhian approach. So, Rajni Kothari was also pretty much influenced by the Gandhian approach post 1970s. So, in the end, we can say that the Gandhian approach, it is a way to explain, and it is also a vision to affect change in society. So the Gandhian approach, it has been followed by three kinds of persons. Who are those persons? They are professional academicians, activists, and politicians who are inspired by the Gandhian philosophy. The followers of this approach, they try to see as to how basic tenets of Gandhism, such as truth, non-violence, satyagraha, swaraj, Ram Rajya, Sarvodaya, they can be applied to explain issues in Indian politics. So the issues which have received the most attention of political scientists on the Gandhian approach, they include decentralization, dissent in democracy, social harmony, the importance of the rural society, the place of agriculture in the society, especially issues relating to major crops and cropping patterns in various parts of the country, different types of irrigation and irrigation systems, right? Storage, transport, and marketing of agricultural produce, and issues and related constraints, as well as the use of e-technology in agriculture for the benefits of the farmers. So all these agricultural issues, as well as issues relating to direct and indirect farm subsidies and minimum support prices, and the public distribution system as well, that is there in our country, the objectives, functioning, limitations, and revamping of that public distribution system, and as well as issues of buffer stock and food security, and also issues of technology missions in agriculture. So these agriculture related issues, how to develop agriculture, whether using the Western model or whether using indigenous model. So those issues, to find answers to those issues, scholars and political scientists have shown a lot of interest in Gandhiji's works. So, scholars, they have also used Gandhian perspective to critique the Nehruvian model, which we have already discussed. The Nehruvian model of centralization, of creating big industries, industrial cities, big public sector corporations, public sector units, or public sector enterprises like the NTPC, the Bharat Heavy Electronics Limited, and many others, the Gas Authority of India Limited. So all these big industries were created to provide employment. However, they had a side effect, is that the people, they had to migrate en masse from the villages to the cities, leading to a de-destination of the people. And the village society, it suffered a lot. And Gandhiji's vision, which was to create self-sufficient village republics, they suffered a setback from this Nehruvian perspective. So in today's class, we have finished the first unit of this paper. We have discussed the Marxist approach, and we've discussed the Gandhian approach as well. So Marxist approach is more focused on the workers, and especially the subaltern sections of the workers. And Gandhian approach, it is a it is a broad approach. It is not only limited to the workers, but it talks about a lot of things. It talks about the state, it talks about the economy, it talks about agriculture, and the form of economy that Gandhi views is the economic trusteeship, theory of economic trusteeship. He talks about, he doesn't emphasize on class conflict. He doesn't believe in class conflict. Rather, he believes that there should be a relationship of trust between the worker and the owner. between the peasant and the landowner. And only through this relationship of trust, the landowner should behave like a fatherly figure, right? Only through this relationship of trust, these conflicts can be sorted out, and the economic upliftment also can be done of the worker. So that is why the leftist approach or the Marxist approach, it does not rule out violence, whereas Gandhiji's approach is based on non-violence, on creating peace and tranquility in the society rather than class conflict. So this is a major contradiction. So thank you so much for joining today's class. And in the next class, we will be discussing the second block. So thank you. Namaste.